But what we're finding is that that belies a truth about how much and in what ways people are actually saving. So the year that we conducted the research, the personal savings rate in this country was about 5%. 5% of one's income was being saved. But just like the number of, let's say, your income at the end of the year doesn't really reflect the reality and nuance of how that money is coming in, the number at the end of the year in your savings account belies so much of the activity of the in and out of how people are using these products. So we found that 17% of a household income flowed in and out of some kind of savings vehicle. We call them high volume, low balance savers. And you know, Sam, the mechanic, every week he put a few dollars into his savings account and then on Sundays withdrew it and to fill up his tank. So if you looked at his balance on Sunday, it was low, maybe zero. But he had a method and he had a habit of savings. It just didn't look traditional in the way that we're used to seeing it. So some high-level takeaways as we think about designing products and programs to support those that we're serving. I'll start from the top. Now, soon, later. A lot of times when we talk about finances, we think that it's something long-term. We think about savings as something that's high dollar. And for financially fragile families, that can be overwhelming and inaccessible. Folks aren't thinking about now and then in some kind of abstract way. They're thinking about now, what do I need now? They're thinking about soon, next 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, next mortgage payment, next tuition bill. And then they're thinking about later. And they want to invest in later, but it often gets trumped by the now and the soon. Savings products need to be responsive to these different time frames. They need to allow people to get money, get access when they need it. I'll echo, Brian yesterday mentioned the automation and the nudges. Those are great tools when you think about designing and delivering savings products. High-frequency saving decisions and revolving savings. Again, it's the spend up, save down, spend up, save down. I don't want to dismiss or take anything away from the power of auto-enrollment of a 401k. You set it and you forget it. But we found that households are making frequent, almost daily savings decisions. We need to think about the implications of that. Weak commitments. For folks that are, sort of walking the edge, anything that asks me to leave something untouched or reduces my access to it, I'm not going to be really inclined to take that up or use it. Again, the way, let's say in this case, savings, the way savings products are designed has incredible impact on whether people save or don't save. And finally, balancing structure and flexibility and enhancing control. My favorite story about this concept is a woman in Mississippi, Janice. She works for tips at a casino. She's really striving to save more. She has an incredibly organized and intentional way of managing her money. But a traditional savings account at a bank, y'all might know, allows only for 6 withdrawals and transfers in a month. Life happens to Janice more than 6 times a month, so that was not going to work for her. So what she did is she found a bank 45 minutes away. She opened a checking account, which has no restrictions on what you can pull in and out, and that became her savings account. She was setting up her own guardrails. So it was inaccessible enough that she wouldn't be tempted to pull out, but still there if she needed it. So the diaries, before I sort of switch, was incredibly valuable, beyond our wildest sort of imaginations about insights to how households in America are managing the day-to-day, how they're building resilience, how they're thinking about the long term. I want to now sort of narrow this funnel a little bit and talk about what that means maybe for students. I will come back to the journey shortly, but I want to get a little more detailed into the life of one student I met last year as part of a different research project, Jared. And I'm going to introduce Jared to you in pieces. I'm going to tell you about his housing, I'm going to tell you about his education, tell you about his employment and his health. So let's start with his housing. So Jared is in his mid to late 20s, and for almost 7 years he'd been living in his own apartment, renting his own apartment. And his mother fell ill recently. Actually, the story yesterday about Austin really reminded me a lot of Jared. So he moved in with his parents, and he took on the role of caregiver. It's an incredibly intense position, and he lost the autonomy of living alone, but he gained 40 minutes on both sides of his commute to and from work. So Jared, his education, he was enrolled in the Borough of Manhattan Community College. He was trying to finish up a few credits in an associate's in applied science to then transfer to a 4-year school and get his bachelor's in nursing. He had 12 credits, give or take, and for a full-time student, y'all know, that could be done in 1 semester. However, you know, he had been working full-time and he was looking forward to decreasing his hours, using his savings to finish this all up, but then his mom got sick, which I mentioned. He'd been able for a few years to count on pretty steady paychecks from this job, but with his mom's illness and the demands on his schedule, he's had to switch and shift more than usual. It's affecting his take-home pay. It's causing tension with his employer. The savings I mentioned really bore the brunt. The medical bills were coming hard and they were coming fast, and the savings was dwindling. And finally, his health. Between his schedule and his mom and his work, he didn't have a lot of time to cook. He ate out often, he ate out cheaply, more than he'd like to. Again, the demands on his time didn't leave a lot of space for working out. So I want to zoom out, and let's say Jared felt the flu coming on. So he goes to his doctor. What do you think she's going to ask him? What data is she going to collect about Jared? Does he smoke? How much does he drink? Take his blood pressure, his temperature? It's unlikely that she's going to ask about his work or class schedule. It's unlikely she's going to ask, what neighborhood are you from? What kind of access do you have to fresh food? So let's say then he goes to the bank. He needs a personal loan to help manage some of these medical bills. What will the lender ask him? What's your income? How steady is it? What's your credit score? It's unlikely the lender will ask, are you managing the chronic illness of a loved one? Jared's doctor, his lender, his landlord, his advisor, they're all collecting data in silos. They're all creating diagnosis in silos. You can't help but wonder, how would the diagnosis, the credit decision, the career advice change if any of these specialists consider Jared as a whole person? Dr. Rennick mentioned a little bit about that with the financial aid and the housing. Imagine if those two departments communicated. As we thought about student financial health at CFSI, we were struck by how many variables and influences get factored in, and how our whole orientation about student financial health could change if we thought about it more holistically. So let's go back to this journey. We've identified this issue, right? I want to focus on diagnosing, designing, and delivering. How do we help? How do we use data to design the tools that will support students? So back to CFSI, after we had our framework, we created 8 indicators of financial health. And we're currently in the process of working with our network to do exactly that, to measure consumers' financial health. We intentionally made those indicators simple, easy to track, easy to use, and we built them around our spend, save, borrow plan framework. These are activities we all do, no matter our income or our financial health. And we couldn't help but wonder, is there a translation? Is there a way to leverage all of the data that you as colleges are collecting to develop a set of student financial health indicators? Could those indicators, could the diagnosis of student financial health help colleges design and deliver the relevant and responsive strategies? So we spoke with colleges and students, we spoke to folks here at GSU, other thought leaders, and resoundingly the answer was yes. There was broad agreement that getting a pulse, collecting and using data en masse would be key to helping improve student financial health. And in many cases, we learned about ways in which this was sort of already happening. At LaGuardia Community College, for example, they noticed that if students bought books the day of or the day after class, they were much less likely to succeed academically, but then they found out when they dug into it that it also was an expose of some financial vulnerability. This is one of thousands of examples I could, rattle off as we think about how is the data that you're collecting already being leveraged. So this year's CFSI, along with 8 colleges and universities, I'm very thrilled to say GSU is among them, are working to begin thinking about exactly what are those indicators. How might they be used? It's clear to me that we have a lot to learn from Dr. Rennick and his team, but we're committed to thinking about this broadly. We're committed to thinking outside the box. Let's think about Jared. What does it tell us that he changed his address? What does it tell us about his financial situation if he's utilizing the emergency aid program? What about tardiness or absence? Remember, he was gaining 40 minutes on either side of his commute. We wanted to decipher the data and being mindful that it's not just financial data that we need. We need to paint the full story. What's happening in your students' housing, in their health, in their families, in their commutes? So mirroring some of the indicators that CFSI had developed, it was actually just last week that we convened these colleges and universities, and I want to give you a little bit of a taste of some early brainstorms around what these indicators could be. Won't surprise anybody. In the spend category, are students paying their tuition in full? Are they utilizing all of the financial resources available to them or that they're eligible for? Save, do they have a $500 cushion? How relevant and important is it to know their cash on hand from their FAFSA? Borrow, is the student requesting emergency aid? How often? What are the credits that they're earning in relation to how much they're borrowing? Plan. Are students showing up to workshops or using campus resources? Are they reapplying for aid in a timely manner? We're all here to improve the lives and futures of young people, students, who admittedly are not always young. And building a strong evidence base through the use of data is an exciting and powerful opportunity. And I want us to keep a few things in mind while we're doing that. First, we must continue to talk to students directly. We cannot separate ourselves from their stories, from their experiences. They are who bring life, breathe life into all of this. And again, working to serve others, we have to be very real and make no assumptions about what's going on the front lines. We have to remember that they, like us, are complex and multidimensional. And as we think about student financial health, really value that complexity. And finally, we have to remember that financial services are just a means to an end. Nobody wakes up and thinks, man, I really want a student loan. They want a career. They want a future. Jared needed to support a loved one, and a personal loan was his vehicle to do that. And while financial services are just a means to an end, they are an incredibly commanding one. They have the ability to ease fears, to bring calm. They also have ability to create deep anxiety. So we have an incredible opportunity to think about how to design, how to deliver, how to distribute financial products and services, general programs in a way that really supports students. I'll close with this. I want you to think about almost any service that you use or employ. Healthcare, home repair, transit. The way we currently use and design our services is fairly fragmented. It doesn't reflect our daily lives. For example, Our physical health is about so much more than our step counts. Our housing security is more than the wiring and the plumbing. Education is more than just the credit hours that add up. To quote Walt Whitman, we are large and we contain multitudes. And yet almost all the services we employ service in these fragmented and fractured ways. Over the last several years, personally, professionally, politically, I've been exceedingly reminded that the cost of segregation is high. Our communities are made up of individuals that are managing incredibly complex lives. And we all stand a much better chance of thriving if we recognize and value our own and one another's complexity and interconnectedness. Think about our work. Think about our own lives, your own lives. Every day we're making decisions that have far-reaching implications. We move to new cities. We take care of loved ones and aging parents. We feed children. We build networks. We pursue passions. We take risks. Often these decisions come at the cost of emotional or financial health. And when we fall, it's our personal and our social and our collective safety net that we rely on. It's our connections and our relationships that keep us afloat. It is the realization that we're making these decisions as part of something bigger. Colleges have an unprecedented opportunity to change and be part of this paradigm shift. You're already such a deep part of something so much bigger than just your students' education. Imagine serving students in a holistic way, combining that human-centric frontline relationship with intentional and quantitative uses of data, smart uses of data. Indeed, to redefine student success, exploring the financial health journey. So that's all I have this morning. I appreciate your time, and I hope that some of you have some questions that you'll be willing to bring up, or any comments that you have about what I've shared. But thank you for your time.
Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Ladha?
This somehow does not strike me as a shy group. I could be wrong, but we have time for a few. And if you're sort of in the middle there and want to shout it out, I can repeat it so it's heard. Yeah.
New York, you presented a slide that kind of talked about the evolution of financial literacy, and it went from financial literacy, which is just sharing information, to financial capabilities, to financial health. Can you maybe share a little bit about the observations CFSI has seen over the years and how that transition has occurred?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, James. For years, this financial inclusion space, well before my time, really focused on literacy and education. And we think about that at CFSI as what you know. But study after study show that just knowing something, whether it's financial in nature or anything else, doesn't really impact action. There's been studies that over 500 or more individuals, there was no difference in their actual financial health outcomes based on what financial literacy classes they took. So then the field shifted to what we thought about as financial capability. What is it that you are doing? So literacy is what you know, capability is what you do, and still we weren't really quite hitting ultimately what we wanted to achieve, which was financial health outcomes. So what is it that you achieve? So CFSI a few years ago introduced the idea of financial health as an outcome-based, behavioral-based approach to what it is that we're seeking. We're all seeking to be more financially healthy. So it really was an evolution of what you know, which leads to what you do, which then leads to what you achieve. I also appreciate that I'm standing in front of a room of educators, so I'm not trying to knock financial education. It's an incredibly important tool, but the applicability of that information is important.
Right here in the center.
Oh, I'm sorry, right in front of me.
Final solution and what that looks like and an example of how that was implemented that brought success to a student?
That brought success to a student?
Right, or have you been able to track that particular data when you talk about the what you know, the capability and the achievement, knowing that it's a whole student that we're trying to serve? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and admittedly, CFSI is a little bit new to the space, so what we're hoping, maybe in 18 months from now, I can answer that question on a student-specific basis, but we have a lot of data on consumers in general, in terms of those that go to financial literacy workshops versus those that go to maybe one-off financial sort of coaching session versus those that are then given high-quality products or high-quality supports that actually bring about the achievement. So it's not lost on us that a lot of counseling and coaching can be incredibly useful to help someone with what they do, but we strongly believe that the right products and programs will help people do that. So as an example, with savings, we have supported the development of certain savings products that utilize small dollar savings, maybe a roundup, something that feels accessible, something that's withdrawable in real time. We've seen the impact of gamifying savings. We've seen the impact of socializing savings. We know that so much of our financial lives are social. So really taking what we learned from the research and applying that to an actual financial product. And we do think that measuring that with our 8 indicators, and I can maybe send that out if you want to see how we're thinking about that for general consumers, to give you an idea of what that translation might look like for students and how we then design the interventions based on that data. So I hope to be able to answer that question in the next 18 to 24 months. Yeah.
Or questions that would be recommended that you explore. And I'm thinking specifically about an example when you go to the doctor's office, they hand you the clipboard and they want you to put X's on everything that might be concerning to you. Are you aware of any agencies or any work that's been done in that space to develop a series of questions that those who want to serve students in a holistic way, in a financial way, might want to collect data in a non-threatening, you're certainly a nosy kind of a person trying to get this information so that we could start to address these with our students?
Yeah, the examples that come to mind when I first started this research really are the sort of the single stops, the Spark Point centers, the ASAP in New York. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but they really address the student in a much broader way. I think there's still room to go, but for single stop, for example, they do tax filing for the students, and in that process really collect a lot of household information. They make sure they are receiving all of the benefits that they're eligible for. They are making budgets, so they're seeing what's coming in and what's going out, and the coaches have a pretty trusted relationship with those students. In many cases, those types of offices are providing transit. So if you're in urban areas, a Metro card if you need it. They're providing access to other campus non-academic resources like food pantries or childcare, and they're tracking the use of those things. Is that spike or dip? Is the holidays a really high volume time for food pantries? They're helping folks with textbooks if they're seeing in their budget that it's pretty thin margins. So I think that there's good examples in the field. Spark Point Center is out of the United Way, and right now they have locations primarily in the Bay Area, but certainly hoping that that gets replicated. But again, it's a much more holistic, not just academic way of collecting data. And one thing I'll be very honest with you, as we think about data, we have to think about sources of data. And so what these coaches are collecting, let's say at the single stop or the Spark Point, how do we think about sharing that and with who? And that data is self-reported. That data is maybe updated monthly versus a FAFSA, which is annual or, per semester. So there's, ways we're going to have to bridge some of this. But there are some examples out there of folks that are trying to do that.
So I actually have a question.
Great, thanks, Lisa.
And we have about 5 more minutes, just so we're aware. Do you think that the student refund period at the beginning of the semester kind of mimics the volatility and instability of income that you were seeing in Americans? And if so, have you guys looked into at all some ideas like our AVP has had, like spreading the refund out throughout the semester like a paycheck, and or opening up tools like the student's ability to maybe put a portion of their refund into savings at all?
Absolutely, yeah. I actually meant to bring up when I was talking about the spikes and dips that the tuition disbursements are huge spikes, right, that happen once, twice a year. I was really excited about Aid Like a Paycheck. They did a national study. For those that aren't familiar, it disperses payments so it's not so lumpy, so it's not one big spike, but rather over the course of the semester, so that at the end of the year when people should be writing papers, they're not dropping out to get a job because their money's all gone. As it turns out, and I'd be curious to hear from schools that have tried this themselves, nationally, from what I understand, MDRC, who conducted the research, found that there wasn't a huge impact, and it could be the design and delivery. The final results aren't out, but that was interesting to me. So I think we need to dig a little bit deeper into how we maybe mitigate some of the tuition and smooth that out, learn why maybe that wasn't as useful. And then as we think about an opportunity to promote savings, you think about tax time savings. Y'all might be familiar that when people get their refund, there's been so much energy and investment put into leveraging that moment when folks are sitting on probably the biggest lump sum amount of money they're going to see in the whole year. It could be up to a quarter of their annual income, saving a little bit of that. So I know there's a lot of programs around using that, that same moment for students, and I think there's a lot the financial inclusion space can bring to bear to that conversation about we've learned what works and doesn't work at tax time savings.
And with that, our colleagues from San Jacinto, where are you guys at? Oh, there you are. They actually are the pilot school of that refund as a paycheck idea.
Yeah, I didn't know you were here.
So they're here actually, so that's a kind of testament to that. So I don't know if you guys want to give a comment on that or.
Yeah, I hope I didn't misspeak about that.
Microphone now. What we found from the data was that we had less students stopping out. We had our retention rates from semester to semester for the students that were involved in the pilot program was higher than students who were not. And so we decided to go ahead and move that to our normal disbursement.
Oh,
so
great.
we do multiple disbursements. It's not quite 8 like a paycheck. We were doing 3 disbursements this year. Next school year, we're going to increase it to 5 disbursements per semester, with that first disbursement being large enough to pay their tuition and fees, and then the subsequent will be refunds to the student.
Yep, that's great.
We did see that when students would need to maybe stop out or withdraw, when we had to do our Title IV, return to Title IV calculations, it led to lower balances for students to have to pay back to the institution and to the Department of Education, which led to them being able to enroll in the next semester as well.
Okay, yeah. I'd love to find you and talk to you more about that. That's great. So I think we're probably out of time. Thanks again. If you have questions, I'll be here all day. And my contact information is easy to find. But again, thanks for your time. This has been really exciting for me, and I look forward to learning more today.